Ezekiel Jackson, Heath Slater, Justin Gabriel, and Wade Barrett, the Core.
They have dominated everyone since arriving on the scene here on Friday night.
Gang mentality right there.
For the Core, we didn't really have much direction.
It sucks, man, being honest.
The Core was a thing, and
The Nexus was without question one of the most frustrating cases of WWE dropping the ball on what could have been an all-time great faction. Even worse, however, is them trying to create something out of its dead carcass. Enter The Core, a low-effort spin-off that ultimately failed to recapture the initial magic of the Nexus. So what exactly happened? How did The Core become such an afterthought that fans only remember the two R's in their name and for having so many versions of the same theme song? In order for us to understand how rotten to the core this faction really was, let's go back to the formation of the group. After some questionable decisions in handling their John Cena problem during the tail end of 2010, Wade Barrett slowly started losing his grasp over his faction, the Nexus. And with tensions growing amongst the members and their leader, CM Punk saw an opportunity to seize control of the group. So, on the January 3rd, 2011 edition of Raw, a triple threat steel cage match to determine the #1 contender for the WWE Championship was announced, with Barrett being elected by Punk to be its third participant. Should he lose, however, he would be kicked out of the group, with the straight-edge superstar taking over as the new leader as per their agreement. During the match, Punk would come out, initially looking like he was going to help Barrett escape the cage, only to rip his armband and screw him out of the title picture by symbolically kicking him off the cage. Now exiled from his own faction, Barrett would make the jump to the blue brand, randomly assaulting the Big Show during a fatal 4-way #1 contenders match that same week. He would later explain his actions, comparing himself to Julius Caesar and claiming that he wanted to only go after the biggest and baddest that SmackDown has to offer. Barrett would face Big Show in singles action the following week, ending in a no contest when Heath Slater and Justin Gabriel, who left Punk's new Nexus after refusing to participate in his initiation, came out to attack Show, turning it into a 3-on-1 beatdown. In an unexpected twist, Ezekiel Jackson would also appear out of nowhere and take part in the beatdown, with each man delivering their finishers in a dominant display of solidarity. And with that statement made, the Core was officially born. 4 equals, as Barrett liked to claim at least, with one goal in mind: to be the most dominant faction on Friday Night SmackDown. In later interviews, Heath Slater would shed more light on the origins of the group's oddly misspelled name, saying,
O-R-E, I heard was trademarked, and then C-O-R-E was trademarked, and then I guess Vince was like, well, just add another R.
Of course, this wouldn't slide in kayfabe, so Barrett had to make up an equally ridiculous story to explain it to fans and media alike back then. But going back, the Core didn't waste time making their presence felt, helping Justin Gabriel score a huge upset victory over Edge in the main event of SmackDown the following week. And afterwards, they would deliver a post-match beatdown to the world champion, similar to what they did with the Big Show. On the January 24 episode of Raw, CM Punk was out in the ring cutting a promo when suddenly, the Core interrupted, leading to a heated face-off between the two factions. Before things could escalate further though, they were stopped by the anonymous Raw GM, who made a match pitting CM Punk and Wade Barrett for the main event later that night. And just to make things even more interesting, John Cena was appointed as the special guest referee, with the loser and his faction being taken out of the Rumble as an added consequence. Unsurprisingly, the match wouldn't end in a clean finish, as Cena disqualified both men for quote-unquote using profanity. This abuse of power would come back to bite the ref in the ass, however, as the GM voided the decision and instead forced Cena to apologize to both men, or else he would be the one taken out of the Rumble. He did so as obliged, and after which a massive brawl would ensue, with the entire locker room helping Cena fight off the two factions. At the Royal Rumble pay-per-view, the Core and the new Nexus kicked off the Rumble match by engaging in an intense scuffle until order had to be restored by the Raw GM. Unfortunately, all members of the Core would fail to win the Rumble, with Barrett going the farthest after making it to the Final 4. Post pay-per-view, Barrett would turn his attention to the Elimination Chamber, defeating a familiar foe in the Big Show with the help of his buddies to qualify for the titular match. And much like their first encounter, Show would find himself on the receiving end of another handicap beatdown, and again the following week when he tried to save a helpless Rey Mysterio from his adversaries. Meanwhile, Slater and Gabriel would also resume their conquest of winning back the tag team titles. After defeating Kozlov and Santino in a non-title match, the two earned the title opportunity on the go-home SmackDown before the pay-per-view, which ended in a disqualification after the other members interfered in the finish. They would also try and take out the tag champs, but this time, Big Show was successful in fending them off. This all led to a rematch for the tag team championship at Elimination Chamber, with the Corre successfully winning the belts in a pretty forgettable bout. Barrett though wouldn't be as fortunate, being the first man to be eliminated in the Chamber match by none other than the Big Show. He would have a chance at redemption on the SmackDown after the pay-per-view, facing the Giant once again in a singles match, except the Corre was banned from ringside. The world's largest athlete proved to be too much for Wade by himself, losing via countout and afterwards being sent packing along with his crew as the lone Giant stood tall in the end. The following week then saw the Corre interfering in Big Show's match with Kane, with Barrett handing the Big Red Monster a chair which he didn't hesitate to use on his former partner, thereby causing a disqualification. During the post-match beatdown on Show, Justin Gabriel accidentally bumped into a conflicted Kane, prompting him to answer back with a sickening chair shot, much to the shock of the four men. This resulted in a match being made between Wade Barrett and Kane on the March 11 edition of SmackDown, which later turned into a tag team bout after Big Show and the rest of the Corre got involved. And in a very predictable turn of events, it would end in yet another DQ finish after Jackson and Gabriel inserted themselves into the match. As the rivalry between the Corre, Kane, and the Big Show continued to heat up, they would also manage to add another hardware in the group as Barrett defeated Kofi Kingston to become the new Intercontinental Champion thanks to a distraction from the Corre. They would have a title rematch on the go-home episode of SmackDown before WrestleMania 27. However, as Kofi was about to score the victory, the other members of the Corre would rear their ugly heads once more, causing you guessed it, a DQ finish for the millionth time. Their assault on Kofi though would end up being foiled by the four men they've been targeting for the last couple of months, culminating in a big 8-man tag team match being made at Mania. And this time, the Corre finally got their comeuppance when they lost to the team of Big Show, Kane, Kofi Kingston, and Santino Marella in less than 2 minutes. Sadly, it was all downhill from here. First, the group got beat up by John Cena and The Rock after unsuccessfully trying to interfere in their moment. Then, they lost a 2 out of 3 falls 8-man tag team rematch of WrestleMania 27, and perhaps the biggest blow of them all, Slater and Gabriel lost their titles to the Big Show and Kane on the night of the 2011 WWE Draft. It wasn't long before cracks started showing within the unit, with each man wanting to put their own self-interests above the group, leading to several miscommunications during their matches. On the May 6th edition of SmackDown, Ezekiel Jackson faced Big Show in a long-awaited hoss fight, with Big Zeke actually getting the W. But instead of celebrating with his stablemates, Jackson instead walked out on them, leading to the trio viciously assaulting the big man backstage and kicking him out of the faction. This turned out to be a huge mistake, as the excommunicated Jackson aligned himself with their rivals shortly after, defeating the Corre in a 6-man tag team match. In the weeks that followed, the Corre would continue to feud with their former stablemate, with Barrett still managing to keep his title away from the big man by any means necessary. Unfortunately, his knack for self-preservation is what ultimately doomed the faction for good. During a 6-man tag bout between the Corre and the team of Ezekiel Jackson and the Usos, Barrett walked out on his partners, allowing Jackson and the Usos to pick up the easy victory. Later backstage, a pissed-off Gabriel and Slater confronted Barrett, telling him that the Corre is over, marking the end of the short-lived faction. After the split-up, Wade would lose his title to Big Zeke at Capital Punishment and fail to recapture the belt in a subsequent rematch, effectively ending their feud. Jackson meanwhile would only hold the belt for a lackluster 51 days before dropping it to Cody Rhodes and going on a rough losing streak. Gabriel and Slater would continue teaming together for a little while longer but found no success, so they ended up feuding with each other before going about their separate ways. In the end, the Corre did little to elevate any of the members involved, lasting for only 5 months, and was just another fart in the wind amongst the many forgotten WWE factions. So, how bad was the Corre actually? If I were to rate this faction on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm giving it a 5 out of 10. Let me explain why. Much like how spin-offs of popular sitcoms rarely, if ever, become hits like the original, the Corre was pretty dead on arrival from the moment Vince decided to spell their name with 2 R's. It didn't help that they kept doing the same 4-on-1 beatdown, the same DQ finish, and feuding with the Big Show for what feels like an eternity. And based on how much its former members, especially Barrett, disliked the idea behind the Corre, they were probably better off trying to salvage the OG Nexus or just going off their separate ways entirely. Honestly, the only thing stopping me from giving the Corre a lower grade is that they actually won titles during their short run. But what did you think of the Corre? Let me know in the comments below. And speaking of forgettable factions Wade Barrett was involved in, check out the next video here to find out what happened to the League of Nations.